My second book, and my most famous book, I think, but that's kind of like being the world's tallest midget, is The Columbine Pilgrim. What can I say about the origins of The Columbine Pilgrim? Well, around 2009, 2010, I started to get really kind of interested in Columbine. Now, I had been interested prior to that, and had read a few things, had looked at a few things, and had a few thoughts about it, and I had even written a short story called Tears of the Damned, which later was published in another collection, but which was about what if Dylan Klebold, one of the Columbine killers, what if he had survived? What if he and Eric Harris, the other killer, what if they were separated? What if Eric got suspended from school and ended up going somewhere else, and then they got separated, and the massacre never happened? What if, and looking at Dylan's life, as a young man, maybe like 10 or 12 years later, what would have happened to him? So I had dabbled a little into what some would call Columbine fan fiction. I would not call it that at all, but I remember someone derisively saying, or sort of pretending to be friendly, pretending to be nice, but saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to read your fan fiction." So it was not fan fiction. And I didn't insert myself in the story. That's what you do when it's fan fiction, I think. That's where the Mary Sues come from. But around 2009, I think it was around that time. It was that year, right when Considering Suicide was getting published. 2009, 2010, I started really going to some places on the internet where there were a lot of people who were also interested in Columbine, and one site that I became a regular visitor of was Super Columbine Massacre RPG, I think was what it was called. And the founder of this, it was a message board. I don't know if they still have message boards, if that's a format that's still out there. I guess it is. I guess it still is. It's not totally archaic. But the founder of this site, this page, Super Columbine Massacre RPG, he is someone, I can't remember his name right now. Please forgive me for that. But he was someone who had actually created a Columbine video game. It was a very low budget, but it was intended to be it was artsily low budget and cheesy looking, but it was intended to be, that was the whole notion behind it all. And it was completely tasteless. It was like you're one of the killers and you see how many students you can kill, how much of a kill count you can rack up. And so that was a pretty controversial idea for a game, and I never played the game. But he made this game, and of course it was very controversial. And then this site started up. He started this site for people who were interested in the game, but also who were just interested in Columbine generally. And so I got on this site a lot. And I had a username, and I got to know some other people, and made some friends. Some of whom were, friends, people that I knew, that I came to know and remained in contact with for years and years afterwards. But it was like a message board, and you would just go on, and somebody would say, what do you think is the truth about what was Eric Harris's what were some of his favorite music? What were some of his favorite songs, or just like trivia kind of things? Or here's this event that happened that what do we think about this? What do we think about that? And also like forensic type questions. And, the bullets did this, the bullets did that. And so there were a lot of interesting people there, but there were some of them. And there were. I became aware that there were people out there who were more than just interested in this event, but who were more obsessed with it, and who were sympathetic towards the killers, towards Eric and Dylan. The reason why they were sympathetic was because they had been bullied, they had terrible high school experiences, and so they said. Most of them didn't say it's good that Eric and Harris did what they did, but there were a lot of people who said things like, I can understand why getting bullied every day and having this shitty high school life where you weren't popular, where you were made fun of all the time, and so forth, why that would push you in that direction. But then there were others who were just openly worshipful, and you didn't really meet them that often on the message board, but they were out there. I remember seeing some of them. This was back when YouTube wasn't lame yet, when they didn't censor things that often. They let people post whatever. I remember seeing like tributes to Eric and Dylan on YouTube. And elsewhere. I mean, they had their fans and they had their fangirls, and so it was interesting to me in a couple of ways. Number one, I had my own interest in Columbine because of my own high school experience, which was yes. You're correct if you guessed not a positive one. Although not nearly as bad as some people's, not nearly as bad as my protagonist Tony Meanders became. But so I was drawn to the subject for that reason, because it reflected on the kind of things that happen in high school when you become an adolescent, when you become a teenager. And you with the things that happen around sexuality, wanting a girlfriend, wanting status, but being a dork or being a nerd, being not popular, and just having to endure a lot of insults and a lot of bullying, whatever form that might take. So I was interested in it from that angle, but I was also interested in the Columbine cult that I saw developing in certain places. This worshipfulness, this tendency to see Eric and Dylan as gods of some kind, and so I thought at first my initial thought with the Columbine Pilgrim was that it was just going to be all about this tour. That I was really there was something that really intrigued me about the idea of just following a group of people who are Columbine worshipers, Columbine fanatics. It's a religion to them, right? It's sacramental. When Eric and Dylan spilled blood that day, those were holy rites to them, and so these people would would know it by heart. They would have memorized the events that happened, and who got killed first, and then who got killed next, and everything like that. So I thought I would write something. I guess maybe a short story. Or something maybe a little longer, but I wasn't sure what kind of length it would be. But just to have it be all about this cult of people who are visiting Columbine. It's like, when you ever visit a city, like I live in Savannah, and they have like these tour guides that take you around and show you, ghost places where ghosts supposedly manifested themselves, or just historic sites. Here's where this happened, here's where that happened. This would be like a something like that, but something much more intense, and it would be them driving around Littleton, Colorado, seeing all the places like where Eric and Dylan worked, the pizza place where they worked, the place where they broke into the car and got in trouble, the place where they stashed the bombs that were supposed to go off. There was supposed to be a decoy on April 20th, but they never went off. And so they'd visit all these places, and the main tour guide would be this fanatic, this like high priest of the Columbine faith, and he would be so emotional and so invested and just he would speak in grandiloquent ways about the noble deeds of Eric and Dylan, which I know is absurd and nuts, and that's the whole appeal of it. That was the appeal of it to me, that it would be just a peek into this crazy cult, where everything, morally speaking, is inverted. The murderers are become the ones who are good, and their victims are to be hated, or to be just looked down on as cattle that needed to be cleared away. Natural selection, as Eric Harris had on his slogan he had on his t-shirt on the day of the massacre. Dylan had wrath written on his shirt. So that was how I started out, just thinking, okay, well, this will be this will just be following this tour. But then I thought to myself, what if you have a guy who's plotting, who's thinking about doing something terrible, but who's older, just like I'm older now. I was older, I'm older now than I was then, but even back then, I was pretty old to be interested in Columbine. I was one of the older people on the board, but but what if somebody like that? What if you had somebody like that who was abused horribly as a teenager and humiliated, and it happened on a daily basis, and no one helped him and no one did anything about it. He was all alone in his misery. And he can't shake it off now that he's older, now that he's past high school, and we would think that he would just get over it, but he can't get over it, and he's developed this very dark side where he wants to take advantage of a school reunion to exact some revenge, to get some payback for how he had been treated. And I thought to myself, that's that's a really, like, it was again a really exciting kind of premise to work with. And again, it was a character I could pour myself into the same way I did the author of the Diary of a Suicide. I could pour myself into him, but you know, my darker self, my more Dostoevskian, you know, like the shadow self, because this was a guy who had a lot of promise, very smart. He was in grad school. He was, you know, he had a bright future ahead of him potentially, but he just couldn't get over the trauma that he'd been forced to deal with. And so the first part of the book became about him, Tony Meander. I took the name Tony Meander from, there was a kid in elementary school who was named Tony Manders, who had a lot of problems. I don't know how he would be diagnosed today, but he would in 3rd grade, 4th grade, he would still like pee on himself in class, and so as you can imagine, he got picked on a lot for that, and so I thought to myself, you know, he was somebody I thought to myself, you know, well, at least thank God I'm not him. I know that's terrible. It's a harsh sounding thing to say, but when you're somebody who's not that popular, you think of somebody who's even less popular than you, and you think, well, at least I'm not him. You know, it just kind of happens. So I thought I gave him, instead of Manders, I gave him the name Meander, because I thought that was more evocative, because he's kind of meandering towards potentially committing this horrific act. But I had him meet up with the Columbine cult and be taken around on this journey, and have this tour guide speak to him and connect with him, along with others from all over the world. And that's the prologue, and then in chapter 1 we see what he eventually ends up doing, and it's a deeply disturbing passage. You know, it was very cathartic. I'm not going to lie and say it wasn't very cathartic in a lot of ways, but it was also really disturbing, especially when it comes to one particular event, one particular thing that Tony ends up doing to a female classmate who had tormented him and you know, teased him cruelly and everything. And I don't want to go into detail about it here, but initially I just thought that he would kill her in a really terrible way. But what he ends up doing to her is worse, and it's more kind of effed up because of what happens afterwards. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'll say about that. Anyway, I was pleased with how it turned out, and at the time, you know, I was able to get it published by Countercurrents, and later on, after Countercurrents dropped it, it's since been picked up by Terror House Press, and again, it's probably, as I said, my most famous or most popular book, but that's not saying a whole hell of a lot, given that I'm no, you know, Stephen King. But yeah, that's the Columbine Pilgrim.